Practice Test 3. Part 1. Question 1. Use a hacksaw to cut off 6 inches of the armor from making up a junction box when using BX cable. Cut the armor of BX cable with a hacksaw. Use a hacksaw to cut the armor of BX cables. Question 2. Which of the following is not required for a 480Y, 277-volt feeder circuit and panel board? Grounding electrode conductor. Grounding electrode conductor not required on 480Y, 277-volt feeder circuit and panel board. 480Y, 277-volt feeder circuit and panel board does not require grounding electrode conductor. Question 3. Which of the following is not always required in a typical electrical installation? Feeders. Feeders are not always required in typical electrical installations. Feeders are not always required in typical electrical installations. Question 4. Which of the following is not a standard classification for a branch circuit supplying several loads? 25 amperes. 25 amps is not standard classification for circuits supplying multiple loads. 25 amperes is not standard classification for circuits supplying multiple loads. Question 5. The power used by a load supplied 20 ampere, 115-volt branch circuit cannot exceed 2300 watts, 20 amp, 115-volt branch circuit cannot exceed 2300 watts, 20 ampere, 115-volt branch circuit cannot exceed 2300 watts. Question 6. Bonding jumpers shall not be used to connect the equipment grounding conductors of the derived system to the grounded conductor. Bonding jumpers, not to connect the equipment grounding conductors of derived system to the grounded conductor. Bonding jumpers shall not be used to connect the equipment grounding conductors of the derived system to the grounded conductor. Question 7. Fire alarms are electronically monitored. Fire alarms are electronically monitored. Fire alarms are electronically monitored. Question 8. How deep must a trench be on a residential house to bury rigid conduit 120 volts, for GFCI protected? 12 inches. Trench must be 12 inches deep for a residential house to bury rigid conduit 120 volt, GFCI protection. Bury rigid conduit 12 inches deep for 120 volt with GFCI protection at residential home. Question 9. If burying rigid conduit underground in the path of heavy traffic, how deep must conduit be? 24 inches. Bury rigid conduit 24 inches when in the path of heavy traffic. For burying rigid conduit under path of heavy traffic, 24 inches minimum depth. Question 10. When an electrician with minimum experience is about to start an industrial job, where are they most likely to need training assistance? Installing a switchgear. New electrician, minimal experience, will need help installing switchgear. Minimal experience new electrician may need assistance installing switchgear. Question 11. Rigid metal conduit must be buried at least 6 inches. Minimum depth to bury rigid conduit is 6 inches. The minimum depth of rigid conduit burial is 6 inch. Question 12. A 120 volt 20 ampere residential branch circuit may be buried 12 inches. 120 volt, 20 amp residential circuit minimum burial depth is 12 inches. Bury 120 volt, 20 amp residential circuit at 12 inch minimum. Question 13. If a person was hurt on the job and was bleeding from the head, how would you stop the bleeding? Pressure points. Job site injury, bleeding from the head, apply pressure points to stop or slow the bleeding. Head injuries, apply pressure point to stop bleeding. Question 14. What is the reason for new fixtures becoming very bright after installing a sub-panel in a large garage and tapping power from new panels to feed new garage fixtures? Wrong leg hookup. New fixtures becoming very bright after installing sub-panel after tapping power from new panels. Wrong leg hookup is the problem. New lights become very bright after tapping power to feed new sub-panel. Wrong leg hookup. Question 15. The best of the following tools to use for cutting off a piece of single conductor number 6 rubber insulated lead covered cable is a hacksaw. Use a hacksaw to cut a piece of single conductor number 6 insulated lead covered number 6. Use a hacksaw to cut a piece off a single insulated number 6 conductor.